So we are at the end of our session, but before we finish, any comments of the floor, any observations, any questions to any of the speakers? Yes, please.
So just maybe two comments. I had a lot of comments, a lot of thoughts. So there is some serious evidence that education does in the United States makes people more engaged in democratic processes and more knowledgeable. Maybe just the opposite: first knowledgeable and then engaged. I think your comment about the humanities is really good. Also, the notion that the humanities has changed so radically over the last generation that what people were talking about a generation ago and how the humanities could help democracy and what now occurs is something quite different. And I think some of that is reflected in what's happening on campuses. And the last point is, I think you're right at the end that we have to move people towards values and thinking and accepting the notion of democracy. But I think it's also behavioral. The classroom is not only a place to teach democracy, it is a place where democracy can be enacted. And Parker makes this argument very, very nicely and shows through some experiments how this works. So I really want to emphasize the behavioral element.
Sami, please. Yuli, do you want to respond to that? Or?
I think democracy now is less popular or less attached to because states, not nation state, states in general, they less function. Over the years, states do not perform as we expect them to do. So if they are democratic states, then also they are less liked because they don't deliver. So we have to distinguish between the political system and the state itself, the services that it is supposed to deliver. Now, why states are less functional than used to be? There are various reasons. I don't know. For example, one problem I think, which is not emphasized, is globalization. Globalization makes the performance of states much more difficult than used to. And also, globalization increases in inequality, economic inequality in society. For example, in Israel, we don't have one economy. We have two economies. One traditional one, which provides very little to the employees, and another one, the high tech, which enriches people. So I think we have to talk why states less function, and I think this has to do with democracy. If they less function, also they look for other alternatives. In the United States, the state does not function well, so Trump promises that it will function better.
Yoram Perry. The fact that there is a second session which is going to deal with religion made a very awkward situation in the first session. The word religion wasn't mentioned at all. No one of the four speakers spoke about religion. And one of the major reasons why democracy declined is the dramatic rise of religion. And we have to analyze that.
Hi, Pnina Motsafi Haller. I think the recurrent question in this session of why democracies fail is not really looking at the knowledge of the people who are not voting for the democracy that we wish. And what we have to rethink, we as social scientists, is how to better study those people who do not vote for what we believe in. What I encourage us to do is to think reflexively about our discourse and to rethink the notion of doing surveys. When you ask young people, when you ask black people, when you ask the disempowered people in the survey, and they say, I don't care, or I think Trump is great, or like the driver, like the taxi driver that brought me here, I love Bibi because he's patent. Bibi was considered the victim in his view. We are actually not allowing these people to articulate their views. We believe that we know better about, we think from a centrist perspective. And I do think that we have to rethink our tools, our ways of really trying to think why democracies fail is to think about those people who are voting for Trump, those people who are supporting Bibi. And we don't. We stay within our own system of thinking, with our own theories. I mean, all these lectures that we hear were wonderful, were very informed, but they didn't say anything new. We talked to each other. We use the same categories. And I would talk about it in my lecture, but I really think we have to rethink the way we study this question, the way we pose the question is important.
Hello, Adam Seligman. Just a small footnote on the word education. We're all thinking formal education. That's what's in our mind when we say education. Everybody here has done very, very well through formal education. That's how we make our living. So that's what's in our head. But formal education is not the only educational venue open to human beings. And although no doubt a lot is gained as people are shunted through formal education venues, a lot is also lost. And I think we should try, not this minute, but try to expand our notion of education beyond the formal institutional structures.
Other comments, questions? I would just like to say something about Pnina's comment. Actually, there are many research projects about the voters of Trump. We have it here, estranged in their own country, lots of own land, and others. It is not that we enforce our necessarily, not everyone, but the issue has been explored. The question is, and I think it's a very critical question, are we ready to make the principles of democracy more flexible? And my answer personally is no. I mean, there are some hardcore values for a democratic governance, for a democratic set of values. And I think that the problem is that sometimes, in order to appease people who come with a different set of values, which they are not ready to give up on, we give up on. It's like secular people who are being demanded to say, okay, you have no scriptures, then you can accommodate. So I think that it's another question, to which extent democracy is a kind of a black box which we believe in, or are we going to be ready to say, make it more easy for other people to swallow? Alex? Alex, it's a podium.
On the religion, I want to recant, mea culpa. Of course, I should have mentioned religion at least when I spoke about Mr. Erdogan. Of course, that is very unfair not to do that. I think that but it's very different in different areas, in different regions of the world. I think in the Muslim world, of course, religion is of primary importance. And in Turkey, I think for Erdogan's kind of what I call the nationalist authoritarian electoral democracy minus religion is very important, but really for him and his party, religion, Islam, is part of the traditional national cultural identity of the Turkish people. It is what makes us authentic Turks, as opposed to all kind of Western influences, and as opposed to what the previous rule of Turkey wanted Turkish nationalism to be. So it is kind of a nationalistic thing, but I'm not saying, of course, in the Muslim world, the question of religion and its place is of a very central importance, and the power of all kinds of undemocratic forces is, among other things, based largely on this. But in Europe, interestingly, it's really different. I think Orban, interestingly, he says openly that, he says people no longer, most Hungarians do not believe in they do not believe in God. He avoids saying that, but this is what he's saying. They don't believe in Jesus Christ. They just they want Hungary to preserve the Christian tradition. Christian tradition meaning we do not allow Muslims. That is the content of the Christian tradition. Okay? The real content of the Christian. So you cannot say that he mobilizes religious feeling. It is just nationalism. Now, in Putin's Russia, there is a greater pretense. Putin goes to churches on Easter, and he's filmed crossing himself and all those things. And the church is much more prominent, but really it's totally subservient to the state power. In the good Russian tradition, by the way, it's an Orthodox tradition but they used to be Christians in the past. Whereas now I think that Putin's real power among the large sectors of public opinion that do still support him is not because they really believe that he's a believing Christian or a good Christian, but because he's a strong leader of the great Russian Empire. That is, and the Orthodox tradition is part of our uniqueness, so that's kind of a stylistic thing, much more. So I would say Orban is more or less openly secular. And Putin is really, the nationalism is really the overwhelming thing. And Poland, as you mentioned, is kind of in between, because the Polish nationalism was, of course, strongly Catholic. And it's an interesting question which should be examined. I don't know what the answer is, whether the strongly Catholic coloring of this regime actually cost them votes. It certainly gave them votes, but I wonder if, for example, their extremist stance on abortion, of course, they took a very extreme Catholic anti-abortion stand, and I guess that cost them many votes, as maybe would happen in another place.
Thank you, Alex. Luis?
I totally agree. Religion may be a component, and it varies across societies. In some societies, it's more prominent as a part of collective identity. And coming back to your remark about listening to the taxi driver, I guess that if we were to develop a long conversation with the taxi driver, it's not only material resources. The reason that, or lack of material resources, or provision of material resources, that he is so kind, so keen to support Bibi, but a sense of belonging, a sense of dignity, things that I was alluding to in terms of how concrete issues are becoming part of the populist leadership into a sense of direction. And let's take Israel. For many years, Netanyahu played into the nationalist religion card. You remember probably the talk of Bibi with Obadiah Yosef, that Jews, the leftist Jews, forgotten what is to be a Jew. That is issues that are wider. Netanyahu could play this role of the providential person who understands the course of history, the great statement, etc., etc. All this is coming to an implosion now. Why? Because he did not foresee the role of civil society in Israel. This is a strong component. This reminds me of what you said, that we should not leave nationalism or religion only to the right wing. That is, in Israel, currently, the strength of civil society has tarnished this image of Netanyahu, in addition to many other things. Whether it will maintain itself due to the arithmetic, certainly the parliament cannot take down Netanyahu because of the structure of Israeli institutions. But on the other hand, there are still strongholds, institutional strongholds, that have not been totally affected in Israel. And I guess that we are in a crucial crossroads now, but I'm not totally pessimistic. Certainly the situation the world situation is terrible, is catastrophic, but in terms of populist leadership, we are coming to a point where Netanyahu's leadership may be collapsing. It failed to deliver a sense of direction, and this is the crucial point in the erosion of Bibi's appeal. Of course, there is a political sector that will always continue supporting him, but this is a diminishing part of the Israeli population.
Thank you, Luis. Coffee is waiting, and religion will be discussed in the next session. Thank you very much.